The FCC releases a decision about net neutrality. Benjamin Netanyahu is visiting Congress, and President Obama has requested the authorization of military force against ISIS. Talking Point starts right now. Good evening and welcome to Talking Points. I'm your host, Max Darrow. Before we get the conversation started, let's go over this week's top headlines. John Katko has been named as the top Republican congressman on a Homeland Security task force that will evaluate the government's efforts in keeping violent extremists out of the country. The committee includes 7 other congressmen. Before running for Congress, Katko worked for an organized crime division at the Justice Department. And President Obama vetoed the bill authorizing the Keystone XL pipeline last week. The president said that the bill interfered with a State Department review and therefore his veto had nothing to do with the content of the bill. The Senate has scheduled a vote this week to override the veto, but it is unlikely that they will receive the necessary amount of votes. This is President Obama's 3rd veto since taking office. And a former Marine will be spending the rest of his life in prison for the murder of American Snipers star Chris Kyle and another man. Last week, a jury rejected the insanity plea of Eddie Ray Routh. Routh shot Kyle and another man named Chad Littlefield at a Texas shooting range 2 years ago. Kyle is the subject of the Oscar-nominated film American Sniper. Routh plans to appeal the decision. And when we come back, Talking Points correspondent Mike Riccardi is here to discuss President Obama's request for military authorization against ISIS. Don't go anywhere.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
Here's your check.
Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
President Obama has been leading a coalition against ISIS for months, but has just recently requested the authorization of military force from Congress. Talking Points correspondent Mike Riccardi is here to talk about the request. Mike, good evening.
Thanks for having me.
So before we go into the war authorization, could you recap what has been happening lately with ISIS?
So Italy has been facing a lot of threats from ISIS over the last couple of months, and this is mainly because ISIS has an anti-Christian campaign going on. You know, they've threatened Italy, saying that they will throw homosexuals off of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. They had an image showing their flag over St. Peter's Square, excuse me. And they actually are targeting the Pope for bearing false witness to Islam. And with that, Italy has been receiving almost record high numbers of immigrants from Libya. And the fear is that ISIS militants are going to somehow sneak through with these immigrants and they could pose an actual threat. The Italian government is going to be waiting for UN Security Council guidance because their military is very small. They only have 5,000 deployable troops readily available, so that is a concern. And then another topic in the latest ISIS news is the recruitment of Western girls and men, but mainly women. There have been 5,500 of them, or 550 of them so far, and 100 of them are from Britain. And basically, these are very young girls, but they're also very educated, which is strange. But it's basically because they're not getting the answers that they're looking for at home or in school, and they're going there and they're marrying these ISIS militants.
How young are we talking?
I've seen ages 14, 15, 16. There is a prominent figure who is 20 years old. She has been a main recruiting figure in this recruitment of young girls.
Okay, so now why did President Obama ask for this authorization, and what does this mean for the future of the conflict?
So basically, they're not really trying to change much with the conflict, but he asked for the authorization because he wants to show that the United States as a whole is a united force against ISIS. And it's also going to give Congress the opportunity to kind of work together and pass legislation through. What he's been currently doing to fight ISIS has been mainly through the power of the 2001 and 2002 authorizations of military force that were passed through the Bush presidency. And the main difference with these is that Obama's authorization is going to be limited to 3 years, while both of those authorizations were open-ended. So there's no timeline on when or what they could do and where they could go.
Give me the Congress reaction and how was the White House responded?
So Republicans, surprisingly, are saying that it doesn't give Obama enough flexibility and enough power, which is very ironic because they've been critical of him in the past of overstepping his bounds. And then on the other hand, Democrats say that, you know, the definition of ground troops and the authorization of force is not clear enough, and they're afraid that this could be an open-ended war. The White House has said that the language is purposely vague as to offer sort of grounds for debate on the issue, and Obama is willing to negotiate.
How likely do you think this is to get passed?
I don't think it is very likely, because even though almost all members of the House and the Senate feel that this needs to be passed, they're very far apart on why it should be passed. And one of the leading Democratic senators has said that, you know, he can't possibly see that this is going to get through. And one thing to note is back in 2002, when the Bush authorization was passed, of the 114 representatives, 56 were yes votes and 58 were no votes. And for the Senate, 18 yes votes and 8 no votes. So it's kind of split. So I would not be surprised if it did not get passed.
If it does get passed, do you think we're going to see any American troops on the ground, or is it going to be solely a drone war?
So they have said that they don't want to use ground troops, but President Obama said that he is willing to negotiate the use of ground troops, and that's again why Democrats are afraid, because they want a definition of what that is going to mean for the future.
Mike Riccardi, thanks so much for being here with us tonight. Great updates as always. The Prime Minister of Israel is scheduled to address a joint session of the United States Congress this week. Benjamin Netanyahu's visit has been quite controversial. With more on that controversy, Talking Points correspondent Tom Beckley is here with us in the studio. Tom, good evening.
Good evening, Max.
Tom, what will Netanyahu talk about in his speech?
Well, Netanyahu's speech is almost unanimously expected to address the dangers, according to Netanyahu, of the proposed nuclear talks currently underway with Iran in Geneva with other world powers. And Netanyahu's comments on the talks have kind of ramped up in intensity over the past few weeks, as he's frequently and publicly for a very long time called Iran's proposed nuclear ambitions an existential threat to Israel, and has said the Iranians are not to be trusted.
So what is at stake then in the nuclear negotiations with Iran that Netanyahu is expected to criticize?
Well, at stake in these sanction talks, well, there's a kind of a brokered deal that's kind of being talked over about an exchange where the kind of big 6 nations at this Geneva conference, the United States and other European powers, that have imposed these international sanctions on Iran are expected to maybe lift some of those sanctions, which, range from, hurting the Iranian economy by limiting their oil-dominated exports, and, kind of limiting Iranian citizens' access to basic goods through, inflation. And there's also the value of Iranian currency has greatly declined, and the Iranian economy is losing a huge amount of money. So the Iranians are interested in getting those sanctions lifted. And in exchange, the possibility is from Secretary Kerry, and that is Iran will agree to limit its mining of uranium so that it will not have the capacity to develop nuclear weapons. And so that's really what's at stake, is that nuclear weapons may be prevented from getting into Iranian hands, and Iranian citizens can live without those sanctions.
In our final 30 seconds, tell me, there's been a lot of controversy about this planned speech. Just tell me a little bit about the relationship between Obama and Netanyahu.
All right, well, it's a very strained relationship, Max, because for one, Netanyahu's speech is going to be occurring because of an invitation by House Speaker Boehner, Republican Party leader, one of them, which happened expressly without Obama's permission, probably because he knew it would directly conflict with the White House's foreign policy, which is to negotiate with Iran and seek this nuclear deal. And Netanyahu is expected to, all his comments are expected to fly completely in the face of that, and, to kind of echo support for Obama, because a lot of Democrats have called this a very disrespectful move. Even, a lot of Democratic lawmakers have said they will boycott this, such as members of the Black Congressional Caucus, Vice President Joe Biden. And basically, it's Susan Rice, actually, she kind of, I think best summed it up, is that it's injected a partisan note into U.S.-Israel relations. And also, Netanyahu is accused of using this as a kind of a publicity stunt before his election in a couple weeks.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining us. And when we come back, science correspondent Sawyer Rosenstein talks about cyber spying, and Ray Merrick breaks down the conflict in Yemen.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund reading.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
This new mom is struggling to get the skates just right. Now she's holding on for dear life.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of siblings in foster care will take you just as you are.
Don't look at me. Your hair's a bit frizzy today. Aww. You should pick that up. Oh, you're such a dork. Loser. Here, let me help you with that. Oops.
Every day, kids witness bullying.
Oh, look. Your crush is looking at you. Poor you.
They want to help, but don't know how.
See, no one here's gonna help you, because no one
Teach your
likes
kids
you.
how to be more than a bystander. Visit stopbullying.gov.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Now, cyber spying is the newest form of espionage, and science correspondent Sawyer Rosenstein has more on what this might mean for the future. Sawyer, good evening.
Good evening.
So just right off the bat, tell us what's going on with cyber spying.
Well, cyber spying is basically mainly governments looking in on what people are doing with their computers. And there was a recent finding by Kaspersky, which is a Moscow-based group. You may have heard them. They offer anti-spyware stuff. Basically, they found this thing built into hard drives, not a code that was given through the internet, but actually built into hard drives from companies like Seagate, IBM, Samsung, big names that are in most computers around the world, that is looking at what people are doing. Now, they won't say what country it is, but they said it looks very similar to one that the NSA has used before, so they're basically kind of saying that it's the NSA.
So when you say looking into, can you elaborate a little more on what you mean by that?
Sure. Well, it's very similar to kind of like, if you remember the Sony and the Target hacks, it's kind of like that. They're going in and they're getting information, except the difference is they're not trying to release the next James Bond movie or steal your credit card. What they're trying to do is they're trying to watch out for things that you're doing. So kind of like, you know, the CIA, except instead of spying on you from a van outside, they're looking in your computer.
How common is this?
Well, it's a lot more common than you think, especially all these, looking in on people's computers and their attacks. There's actually a great website online made by a company called Norse, and it tracks all of the different attacks. And actually, you probably can see it on your screen right now. These are all the attacks that have gone on since this show has started. And if you notice, there's more than 1,000 of them, especially attacking the US. And if you look on the left of where they're coming from, I mean, we're talking some pretty big companies, China, the US, militaries, and governments. That's a big one right there.
So tell me about the ethical issues behind this.
Well, obviously there's a few ethical issues, and this goes back to like the NSA phone tapping scandal of, okay, are they listening in on all of my conversations? Are they tracking everything that I'm doing? Because obviously there's concerns about your personal privacy. But at the same time, the argument is, well, we're not looking at everything you're doing. We're looking out for certain things, like, looking for any ISIS activity or any members of extremist groups. And mainly, they're looking in on other countries. So, for example, like Russia, China, Iran, these major countries, they're looking in on them. And they're saying, well, we're looking in on them because they're also looking in on us. I mean, the head of the NSA and the CIA have said that there are people that have currently into our power infrastructure, into our electrical infrastructure, and if they wanted to, they could shut it down. So they're kind of calling this like a cyber war, not just cyber spying.
Last question for you, real quick. Mostly foreign discussion we've had, but is there any domestic cyber spying going on?
There is always a little bit of domestic cyber spying going on because there are members of extremist groups that live within the U.S., and there are obviously concerns about that. And you never know where the attack is going to come from, on the inside or the outside. But with this new revelation that they're inside your hard drives, it doesn't matter where you are, they can check.
Sawyer, thank you so much. A battle for control is raging in Yemen. Talking Points correspondent Ray Merrick is here to tell the key players.
After seizing the presidential palace in Yemen's capital Sana'a, the Houthi rebel group is now in control of the country's government. The Houthis are a Shiite militia group who celebrate a form of Shia Islam known as Zaydism, which makes up the 1/3 of the Yemen population. They initially denied plans to take over the government. Their initial goal was to simply ensure great equality for the poor and to protect cultural traditions. Yemen President Hadi was forced to leave office last month after Houthi fighters overpowered state defenses. But the former president and leader of the General People's Congress recently escaped house arrest and is now claiming he still has legitimate authority over the country. Meanwhile, the Houthi Shiite militia are not backing down and are continuing to advance south and grow in power. The government takeover has divided the country and could lead to civil war. The map shows the territory the Houthi rebels control. The Houthis are not recognized by the Sunnis or southern leaders, which makes it unlikely that the government will stabilize anytime soon. The struggle for power is creating sectarian tensions in the country, which will soon be at an all-time high. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is an enemy of the Houthis and has done its best to cripple the rebels. Yemen's weakened central government is making it easier for the Al-Qaeda branch to freely operate in the country, which is concerning for counter-terrorist agencies in the West. Saudi Arabia is condemning the Houthi rebels and continues to aid Sunni tribes who plan to fight them off. Some Saudi Arabian leaders have accused Iran of backing the Houthi movement, which has intensified tensions between the two states. As Saudi Arabia becomes entangled in the debate, the United States is growing uneasy due to the country's status as a top oil exporter. United States officials are hoping that the controversy will end before Saudi Arabia becomes permanently involved. Talking Points will be back. We'll be right back.
So they say it's a man's world? I don't see anybody's name on it.
While they were doing their thing, we slowly changed ours.
Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
If you want to be a parent, it doesn't matter how you play, what you wear, how you dance, or even what direction life takes you. You just need to be there. You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care don't need perfection. They just need you. Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
We couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Search Ready Kids at nyc.gov or call 311.
Welcome back to Talking Points. The FCC has come to a consensus on an issue that could change the internet for all of us, net neutrality. Here to talk about the vote and the debate behind it is correspondent Abby Isaacs. Abby, good evening.
Thanks.
Before we get to the decision made today, can you explain what net neutrality is?
Yeah, so it basically means an open internet. So internet providers, or ISPs, would have to give consumers equal access to all different content, so apps, everything legal on the internet. So this means that the ISPs can't favor or block any content. So they can't charge content providers for speedier delivery in their content. And they also can't slow content for providers that they compete with in the ISPs. So just some background, ISPs are companies like Verizon or Comcast, and content providers are internet sites like Google or Netflix. So the issue is that right now we don't live in a net neutral world. So Netflix could pay Verizon potentially to get faster speeds on the internet.
What is the debate then surrounding the issue? You talked about these companies, but can you just go a little deeper with me?
Yeah, so the debate is definitely between the ISPs and the content providers. So without net neutrality, like I said before, large companies can pay a fee to the ISPs to get faster speeds on an express lane on the internet, whereas the small startup companies that can't afford to pay the fee, their content will be slower to consumers. So this makes life a lot harder for the ISPs if this proposal is passed, because it's a lot more regulations, so they'll have to focus more on those and have to cut back on investments in new technology. A lot of Republicans are also against this bill because it is a government overreach, they say. So they're actually drafting a new bill that is the same implications as this proposal, but without as much government oversight. However, content producers really like the net neutrality bill because it makes it so Netflix uses a lot more bandwidth than a lot of smaller companies, so it makes it so they pay the same amount for the same internet speeds. So they have to pay a lot less for their consumers to get content faster. They also don't want small startup companies to be at a disadvantage in terms of slower speeds. So some companies that have come out in support are like Google, Amazon, and Facebook.
Now, how did the FCC vote today?
So they passed the bill. It was expected with a vote 3-2. When they had polled earlier a bunch of different consumers, it was a 99% approval rate. So this is a majority of consumers wanted this bill to pass, and it did. So this proposal basically treats broadband companies, or the ISPs, as common carriers like gas or electric companies, so that the FCC can now go in and regulate what they do so that the ISPs aren't prohibiting companies from getting faster speeds.
Last question for you. What are the political implications?
So right now there's not a huge impact. There's been rules in place before on the internet, but they weren't never really enforced. So now this gives the FCC the regulation power to go in and carry out, hear complaints. And so if an ISP is charging too much for internet, they can hear complaints from consumers. So now the ISPs actually have to act in the public interest, so they won't be raising internet prices. That's been a concern, that your internet and broadband prices are going to go up. Now, I've been throwing around the word equal a lot. This doesn't mean that you and I could have the same internet speeds. A lot of people pay different internet prices, so it just means that for whatever price you pay for your internet, all of the websites will load at the same speed. So if I paid less, my internet speeds would be lower, but Netflix and a crowdfunding page would load at the same speed. So there's a possibility that the Republican-controlled Congress now is actually going to pass a bill that will negate this, but that would have to pass Obama, who is publicly in support of net neutrality because he says that he doesn't want the ISPs to be able to pick winners and losers in the online marketplace. So for right now, it's considered a long-term goal, or a long-term win, but with no real effects for the short term because it's going to be so contested.
Abby, thanks so much again. There's been dispute over new islands being built in the South China Sea. Talking Points correspondent Hearns Laguerre Jr. is here to tell us the implications this dispute has on neighboring countries. Hearns, good evening.
Good evening.
So what is going on with the South China Sea islands?
Well, China's constructing 5 man-made islands in the disputed South China Sea. To keep it simple, there's many regions, but we'll talk about the Spratly Islands and the Paracel Islands. The main problem is that there is no country that respects each other's claim. So imagine a major tug of war with multiple components, and this tug of war is between China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, Brunei, Malaysia, and China has the upper hand.
So now what is the dispute actually over?
Now, in the Spratly Islands, the dispute is mainly over natural gas and shipping lanes. In the Paracel Islands, the dispute is over a territorial claim. China owns a majority of the Paracel Islands, but it's in the Vietnamese region. It's in their legal territory. China also is trying to claim shoal from the Philippines, but they haven't been too successful with that. And honestly, the only 2 countries that respect each other's claim is Malaysia and the Philippines.
Has there been any other major conflicts over this region before, or how far does it really go back?
Well, it honestly goes back for decades. This region has been the focal point of many conflicts. Now, this region is a main maritime between the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. And one of the biggest conflicts were, I believe, in 1974 between China and South Vietnam. Their conflict led to 53 Vietnamese troops getting killed, so you can just imagine the amount of conflict that erupted after that. And since then, each major country has owned different parts of this region. And since 2002, the 10-member Southeast Asian nations have adopted a non-binding declaration of conduct to prevent any more hostile actions. The only problem is that China hasn't supported any of these rules. And if you look at the map, you'll see that China has their islands growing by the weeks, by months. So if they start, I guess, inching towards everyone else's claim, you can just imagine how the conflict will unfold.
Hearns, thanks so much for being with us tonight. We'll be right back.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Huntington! Every proper bear knows that the right fit means everything. Especially when it comes to car seats.
Oh, really? I just did what any bear would do.
So know for sure that your child is in the right car seat for their age and size.
I like it.
To learn more, visit safercar.gov/the-right-seat.
Oh, hello there.
Oh, where's that bear?
And that's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you for watching Talking Points. Make sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter. Check out our blog for more Talking Points content, and always CitrusTV.net. I'm Max Darrow. Good night.